Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Zatarans, a New Orleans tradition since 1889. From WWNO New Orleans and our studios in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, this is Louisiana Eats. I'm Poppy Tooker. Always wanted to have a restaurant, but not sure how to make that happen? The pop-up concept is a perfect way to test the waters and just have some fun. On this week's show, we hear from a wide assortment of pop-up entrepreneurs, including Dean Lambert, who heads a pop-up association. And for those toying with popping up behind a stove, Bostonian chef Daniel Bruce tells his inspiring tale of success and what it took to achieve it. Then, we take a close-up look at Louisiana's most important ingredients with Maggie Richardson, whose new book is Hungry for Louisiana. We're stirring the pots, and you won't believe where we'll pop up next on this week's Louisiana Eats. Propeller, a New Orleans-based nonprofit business incubator, recently hosted a fundraiser called Propeller Pop. That night, they gathered together an incredible diversity of pop-up businesses to feed and entertain their guests. The first thing that caught my eye that evening was the sheer number and variety of foods being offered.
I'm Mark Lemaire from Le Pat, A Taste of Burma.
My name is Matthew Koffler. I'm the chef at L'Enfant Terrible.
My name is Laurel Santos, and my business is Laurel's Licks Ice Cream.
I'm Ronnie Evans, and I'm one of the co-owners of Blue Oak Barbecue.
My name is Orlando Vega. I am the co-owner and chef of Congreso Cubano.
Hi, my name is Rob Eddington, and I am part owner of Joie de Vie at NOLA.
Once the initial wave of hungry guests had been served, I was able to chat with some of the pop-up owners about how they got their start. Surprisingly, their backgrounds were as varied as the pop-ups themselves.
I got started making ice cream for friends at home, just for fun. And when I moved to the Marigny, my roommate said, "You should sell this from our stoop." And so I literally started popping up on my stoop once a week starting last summer, and it kind of just took off.
When you're not popping up, what are you spending your time doing?
I'm a mental health therapist.
Well, that just is so fitting because I guess anybody who's in need of some mental help could really use some ice cream too, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's what I say. I say it's impossible to be mad while you're eating ice cream, so it works out.
My name is Jamie Trent.
And I'm Milty.
Just Milty. We are a meatball pop-up, but we also do lots of catering. We've been open for 2 years, and it's really taken off into different things. It used to just be stuffed meatballs, and now we do a whole range of Italian food and catering.
So your business is called Stickball. What's the inspiration for this concept? Why are you making meatballs?
So I've always cooked. I come from a long Italian family that has been cooking forever. My mom owns restaurants. About 2 years ago, I finished my master's and realized, my student loans are due, and I need to make a little extra money. So I started doing this just for fun, like once a month, make a little extra cash, and I got so busy that all of a sudden people were calling us and asking us to pop up at their bars, and we got some catering gigs, and it was hard because I'm a full-time teacher, he's a full-time bartender, so this was all any extra second of time we had, we were making meatballs. This is going to be my last year teaching. I'm going to go full throttle with Stickball, which I'm excited about. I've been teaching for 11 years. And 11 years in New Orleans is kind of like 30 years anywhere else, I think, teaching.
Oh, yeah.
My name is Orlando Vega. I am the co-owner and chef of Congreso Cubano, and we specialize in Cuban food, both traditional and contemporary.
When did you come here, and what are you doing here in New Orleans? How did that come about?
Well, I'm actually Cuban-American, raised in Miami, and I've been in New Orleans for about 3.5 years. I fell in love with New Orleans. I came to Jazz Fest in 2005, and I've been back every single year since. And about 4 years ago, I said, Miami is just too big, too busy, too much money. And I decided to follow one of my dreams and live here. And after 2-3 years of just, wrestling with the city and trying to find my niche, I found it.
And is this your full-time gig running a pop-up, or do you have another job?
This is my full-time gig. Both Rick Austri, my partner, and I's full-time gig. We are both also musicians on the side. So
what do you all play?
I play guitar, and he plays bass and drums. I play in a big Afrobeat group called Kumasi, and he plays in our sister band, which is a samba carnival band called Bachabunda.
So is this the food of your family? Is this how you learned to cook this kind of food?
Yeah, I actually was never a chef in Miami or cook in Miami. I started cooking this food out of homesickness and to show my friends where I was coming from. This is the food I grew up with, but I'm lucky to have a partner like Rick and my other partner, Charlie Miller, who brings something new to the table. Neither of them are Latin, so they bring the new world flavors to the table, contemporary North American flavors.
Although the pop-up operators came from all walks of life, they all shared many of the same challenges getting off the ground. But to them, that's just part of the pop-up fun.
My name is Matthew Koffler. I'm the chef at L'Enfant Terrible. We serve fresh vegetables. We source a lot of food, a lot of herbs, and we also have cheese fries. So we got a little something for everybody.
What are your biggest challenges to running a pop-up?
The challenges is you have to explain to people who you are. So if you're a chef at a restaurant, say like August, Herb Saint and things like that, people have a very easy way of understanding who you are as a chef. We've been doing this kind of rogue chefing thing for about 3 years, and the most difficult thing is just, the first 7 minutes of a conversation, you have to explain to people who you are, what you do, how they might find you, and things like that. So it's an uphill battle, but I think that's the way it should be. Things that are worth it and things that take time are for certain people. As everybody knows, it's a way to get your ideas out there, low overhead, and it's completely up to you. It's a hustle. This is the American dream, the fact that our businesses are either made or broken by what we put on a plate, how much we tweet, how much we Facebook, and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, it's an opportunity that all of us have in the city of New Orleans. You have an active food culture here that's just looking to eat. All you got to do is put it out there, and if it tastes good, people will come back.
I'm Mark Lemaire from Le Pet, A Taste of Burma.
Tell me about your pop-up experience, and how do you negotiate this pop-up experience, and what's it like running a pop-up where you're like a nomadic restaurant? You're not even a food truck, you're just a nomad.
As far as the experience of doing it, it's, there's definitely certain challenges. I've worked in restaurants before, and it's definitely a lot more difficult preparing this stuff in like a home kitchen and then having to bring it out or preparing it on site at different places. But it's also fun with the challenges that it brings, having to overcome these little logistical things. But, it's basically just a matter of scoping out the location where we're going to be doing it at, seeing what we have to work with. And it's a lot of kind of tooling the menu to the location you're working at to see what will work. Are you going to be cooking indoors or outdoors, and what kind of space you have? So it's a real think on your feet kind of endeavor, but it's been so much fun doing it.
Starting a pop-up sounds like a lot of work, but for these entrepreneurs, it's worth it. I think Rob and Aaron of Joie de Vivre put it best.
It takes you a while to get your footing under you if you've never just kind of done this on your own before, of course. I mean, you know your food, you know what you like to eat. It's all about finding your right customer, and then also about finding the right place to pop up and finding your market. I mean, some places you can do well at, and in some places you don't do as well just because your food, it may not, play to that particular crowd. But it's no worries, because with pop-ups you say, okay, well, this is not working out. There's not a whole lot of overhead. I'm going to go over here. There's a bar over here. There's a little kitchen over here. Let's try it here. Let's try it here. It's all about sort of innovating yourself and setting your own hours and putting your own work ethic into it. I mean, you can work 50, 55 hours for somebody else, and and you'll do a great job, and you might get paid pretty decent, but you take those same 55 hours and you put it into your own business. It's a totally different feeling. It is almost I liken it to the difference between owning your home and paying rent. Honestly, you might be putting in the same hours, but a lot of that is coming back to you.
There's a certain sense of satisfaction knowing that something that you created all on your own, and you're not just working for someone else who created a brand or a certain,
Exactly.
it's yours. So that's what's the most rewarding part about it, I think.
When we come back from a short break, Dean Lambert's here with news about the Pop-Up Restaurant Association that's ready to help aspiring pop-up entrepreneurs. Stay tuned. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen and Zatarain's. If you're thinking of getting into the pop-up game, you should talk with Dean Lambert, head of the New Orleans Pop-Up Association. Dean is more than just the head of the association. He's also a managing partner at pop-up turned bricks and mortar restaurant Milkfish. I sat down with Dean to find out more about the recent explosion of pop-ups in New Orleans and his goals for the Pop-Up Association. So how did this all begin? When did you begin this association?
Well, the story effectively begins before the association begins, and that is when we started, when Christina Quackenbush, the chef at Milkfish, and I started to do the Milkfish pop-up, which importantly was the idea of Adolfo Garcia, whom we were working for.
Really?
Yes.
What were you all doing for Adolfo?
We were both waiting tables for Adolfo at Rio Mar.
Wow.
Yeah, Christina was waiting tables, and she would regularly bring her Philippine food in for staff meal or just for barbecues and whatnot. So Adolfo loved her food, and he, being very aware of what happens around the country, and being very much on the cutting edge of all things in the restaurant world and many other things as well, got the idea of her trying out her menu at his restaurant at Rio Mar on a Sunday. From that point, we decided to really push toward making a restaurant. And, obviously it was Christina's dream. It's Christina's menu. And I was all along there just to kind of help her facilitate the idea. We pushed very strongly for, over 2.5 years to get to where we are now. But in that process was developing this understanding of the pop-up scene, which at the time was much less expansive than it is now. At a point, a little while after that, further down the road when we were more regular spots, we came into contact with other people who were doing a similar thing, making an effort to develop a restaurant concept, test their menu, and get their name out there through these pop-ups.
So you decided now we'll have an association. And so how did you herd these cats? And what did you start off with, and what are the benefits to the association?
Well, we were all, for the most part, many of us were in contact with each other anyway, just through the general nature of, I think, a lot of restaurant people in New Orleans being supportive and interested in other things that are going on in the restaurant scene and network. So I really just made it an effort to cross-promote and coordinate and lead each other on to potential venues or ideas or media outlets, and really just use whatever resources each one of us had individually to benefit as a group, as an association of these sort of independent restaurant concepts. So it's a broad idea because there's just a lot of flexibility within it.
So you discover that there's really 3 types of individuals who want to run a pop-up. One aspires to be a bricks and mortar restaurant like you all did. And what are the other 2 types that fit in there?
there's also potential to find that perfect spot where you may be able to pursue your pop-up on a long-term basis, which we did for a short term, and I think we always knew it was going to be a short term, but the best example of that is Cam Boudreau at Killer Po' Boys in Aaron Rose, and it's just the perfect fit. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's a great local bar with amazing local sandwiches, and he's a chef creating po' boys in one of the best bars in the city. Alternatively, there are some individuals who want one day only to do the pop-up and represent their menu, and many of those people are established restaurant professionals working in successful restaurants who on a daily basis are cooking for someone else, cooking someone else's menu. And as rewarding and as great as that is, of course they have their own creativity and their own ideas that they would like to showcase.
If somebody is listening and they're really tempted to try a pop-up, what's the DIY on doing your first pop-up? How do you do this?
Well, at Milkfish, we host pop-ups on Wednesdays, and we have since we've opened. It's been part of our business model, just to sort of give back to the pop-up community, and we make it as easy as possible there. And honestly, we will answer every question that a potential pop-up extraordinaire may have. We offer staff coaching, all of that, and it's actually it's just in the interest of perpetuating the pop-up scene. But effectively, the first thing that you need, of course, is a menu. As is the case with I think all restaurant concepts. The second thing that you need is a location, and the venues vary, and it's been very interesting to me in the last year to see who has become involved in the pop-up circuit, which is what I'm calling it now, and that's what I'm making my project for the summer is to develop a clearly outlined sort of pop-up circuit, which can be conceived in two ways. One is that individuals who are interested in exhibiting a pop-up can sort of follow the circuit in the same way that a comedian might follow a comedy circuit. And for us, we popped up in different neighborhoods around town, and it was extremely beneficial for us to experience those different neighborhoods and experience the different venues, the different types of buildings, and all of that. And it was also, of course, a lot of fun. But ideally, I think that individuals or groups of individuals could follow this pop-up circuit and at least find out whether or not this is something that they want to pursue.
Dean Lambert of the New Orleans Pop-Up Association.
Everywhere we go, people jump and shout. They all want to know what the pop-up's all about. So let's do it. And pop out and celebrate.
Maggie Hine Richardson's new book, Hungry for Louisiana, is the ultimate omnivore's journey through our delicious state. And I am thrilled to have Maggie here to talk with us on Louisiana Eats. So welcome, Maggie.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
So we begin with crawfish because, well, it is sort of the food that begins the year for us in many ways. What about crawfish did you find particularly compelling?
Well, it's funny that the book did come out in the spring and that we arranged the chapter so that, crawfish was the first one.
Even the crawfish made the cover.
That's right. Even crawfish, they were the most beautiful thing, to put on the cover, and snowballs on the back. But I think one of the things that's most interesting about crawfish is how it has been exported beyond its original boundaries. It's permeated the state now. So you have crawfish are as common in North Louisiana as they are in South Louisiana now. And I think that's what's so alluring about it is that we are locked in a common purpose, with everybody else who is enjoying crawfish at that moment. And that's where you really get at this kind of shared recreational pattern. It's understood this is how you're going to spend your spring in Louisiana. And just for the pure enjoyment of food and drink and friends and family and laughing. I mean, it's just that ritual, that springtime ritual is so special and so unique.
Now, everybody is familiar with the boudin we eat all the time. That's that delicious, spicy rice sausage that is so delicious. You get it at a gas station and drive along eating your link of boudin. But I'm not really familiar with red boudin. How did that end up becoming a chapter in its own right?
I wanted to include boudin, but I felt like that story had been told, numerous times, and it is certainly on the radar, I think, of national food writers. Calvin Trillin wrote that beautiful piece in the New Yorker many years ago. And so I wanted an angle that hadn't been reported. And I also, from the perspective of preserving food traditions, which is, an intention of the book, I wanted to look at red boudin. And I had been to Bourgeois Meat Market numerous times for stories and just for pleasure, for personal grocery shopping, and knew that they made red boudin and had tasted it and thought it was fabulous. And this is that Shriever area, so that Bayou country area, that part of Cajun country that is separate from the Acadiana Prairie. But Bourgeois has been around. It's probably the oldest Cajun meat market in the state and was established in the late 1800s by the current owner's grandfather. And he originally had kind of a truck, that he would slaughter one cow or pig at a time, go around this little constellation of small towns in the orbit of Shriever, and didn't come home until he sold everything. And so this meat market, evolved into a permanent shop, which was a meat market and slaughterhouse, and it's existed ever since and has always sold boudin. And then later added one of the things that it's most famous for, which is beef jerky.
Oh, that beef jerky.
Yeah, it's incredible.
That is a miracle in meat.
Yeah.
Now, explain the red boudin.
So the red boudin, well, when I started the project, using some of the resources of our mutual friend Sarah Rowan in the Southern Foodways Alliance, looking at the boudin trail that they'd traced, I knew that there were a few places to start who still made red boudin. So I reached out to all three at the time. One was in Abbeville, one in Brobridge, and the other was Bourgeois, which I knew well. And by the time I finished the project, only one was still making red boudin, and that was Bourgeois.
Well, God bless those Bourgeois. And something else that I think, maybe an outsider, someone who's not from Louisiana or Mississippi too, for that matter, would be surprised that our tamale tradition does not arrive with the huge influx of Hispanics that, people are always talking about. After Hurricane Katrina, we had so many Hispanic people come here, and all of a sudden we had taco trucks. But tamales is a special case all on their own.
That's right. Well, I wanted a chapter that brought in North Louisiana in a real, in a very obvious way. I didn't want to give North Louisiana short shrift, This tiny town in northwest Louisiana, about an hour south of Shreveport, has been making this version of a tamale for more than 100 years.
How did that start?
Well, it's derivative of Spanish soldiers who were positioned, in New Spain at the time. We know that the tamale is originally a Mesoamerican dish, from Mexico, highly portable, made with corn, fill it with some sort of protein, whatever that was, pack it and take it with you. And so that tradition was brought by those Spanish soldiers who were in Texas and at the time that western part of Louisiana. And there was also a strong Native American tradition. So many of the locals there point to the Native Americans as the source of where the tamale came from. But the fusion of those two cultures is what resulted in this particular tamale.
That is so interesting. And, I also love that this is such a amalgamation, your book, and each chapter ends with recipes. And how in the world did you talk those people in Zwolle out of their official Zwolle tamale recipe?
Well, they're public with that recipe. That's published and passed out. And in fact, at the fiesta, the annual tamale fiesta every year, where you will witness tamale eating contests, there's also a booth for instructing spectators on how to make tamales in the old-fashioned way. So there's a strong tradition.
Well, tradition. That is the word that is a unifying theme here in Louisiana. Why do you think that the people of Louisiana cling so tenaciously to these traditions?
I think there are a number of factors that influence that. One has been our immigrant mix that have made these traditions flourish. So you get food festivals. Food festivals were developed around this notion of, hey, we are really good at this. We know what we're doing, and this is ours, and let's bring people in and have them come celebrate this food. So throughout the 20th century, you've seen those traditions not only remain but strengthen as a result of, I think, people just understanding that they're so special and they want to spread the word. And the other thing is we just have a tremendous number of natives. We have more native born in Louisiana than there are in any other state. And so it's really easy to pass down those traditions.
Because we don't like to leave home.
When your mom lives down the street and she can show you how to make gumbo, or, when you've got aunts and uncles who can show you how to make crawfish. I mean, it's seamless from generation to generation. And we are so tethered, I think, to memory and to family when we enact these traditions.
We share a common love for defending endangered foods. When you get into the various Louisiana dishes, in your opinion, what do you think our most endangered foods might be?
Well, certainly red boudin.
Yeah.
And I think that Creole cream cheese, it's probably, I think it's doing well now, its trajectory has been kind of wobbly over the last few years, as we have both discussed and observed. I was so excited not 2 or 3 weeks ago to see it in my local grocery store from the Motes.
Oh,
that was such a moment,
wonderful.
The book had come out, and there is their Creole cream cheese. So that's exciting to see that really spread, I think, in an institutional way, not just in farmers markets, but having it, through a regular traditional, commercial enterprise.
And then I guess if anything ever should happen to that precious snow blitz machine of Ashley Hansen's, we would all really be in trouble.
That's right. That was such an interesting story, too, because unlike all the other snowball operators out there, she's working with a machine that is unlike no other, that has no replacement parts like the others, So, yeah, there's a little tale about having that machine fixed that I was so happy that Ashley shared with me.
Well, I'm so happy that you have shared all of your research and your wisdom and just your really thoughtful insights into our delicious, delicious Louisiana. Thanks for this great book, Maggie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Maggie Hine Richardson, author of the new book, Hungry for Louisiana. Public radio contributor Ian McNulty also covers the food and restaurant scene for the New Orleans Advocate. He's the author of Louisiana Rambles, an off-the-beaten-path exploration of our state's heartland. That makes Ian our perfect food sleuth to tell us what's happening in Louisiana. Ian, welcome back to Louisiana Eats.
Poppy, thanks very much. Great to be here. And I've recently been down around the Atchafalaya Basin area, going through Morgan City, and stopped off at a great little place that I wanted to share with your listeners. It's called Rita Mae's Kitchen.
Rita Mae's Kitchen. So where is that exactly? You're on Highway
90. You're just about to cross over the Atchafalaya River on one of those twin bridges over there in Morgan City. And in fact, if you're on the way up one of those bridges, if you look over, you can just about see it, but you might not think you can see it because this place is that small, Poppy. It's a cottage. And what you get here is good down-home cooking like you'd expect from a cottage. It's, like I said, nestled right in the heart of Morgan City, right there on Federal. And you pull up to it, you'll know you're in the right place. It looks like the final place where you're going to get a good Cajun country feed. This is an enclosed porch for a little dining counter up front, but otherwise you walk in and you're sitting what looks like somebody's living room. It's a tiny place. You can hear every step of the food prep going on in this place. You can hear people chopping in the kitchen, the food hitting the fryer. Very homey, like I say.
What did you eat?
Well, their specialty is what I like to call Creole Bayou Soul.
What is that, Ian?
So it's some of the same stuff you'd expect to find in a New Orleans neighborhood Creole restaurant. Red beans and rice, white beans with fried fish, roast beef po' boys, fried chicken. All these are really good. And things that you don't always find of this quality outside of New Orleans, frankly. But what I really like to come here for, the thing that makes it Creole and Bayou soul, is just the dishes that let you know that you're out in Acadiana. And that has to start with the gumbo. 3 types here: chicken and sausage, shrimp and okra, and the combo, what anybody in New Orleans would know as the Creole gumbo, the kitchen sink gumbo.
Yes.
Just that great roux, mild flavored, potato salad on the side because you're in the country. And the potato salad, of course, the color of a yellow Easter egg, just just a beautiful color there. And maybe a biscuit on the side, too, to dunk into your gumbo. Biscuits and gumbo? Why not? I'm game for that.
Me too.
So fried chicken and fried chicken livers, like I said, some steaks, some etouffee, and then some specialties like the crab patty. Now, this is like a big, fat, very fresh-tasting crab cake that they'll serve on a plate as a special or make into a burger on a bun. This is a place that meets its regulars halfway. I've seen people walk in there and order just about any combination you can think of. Fried onion rings on your shrimp po' boy, not a problem.
Special orders don't upset them. Huh?
No, not at all. Not at all. Make sure you get a sweet potato pie when you go. You'll probably be full. The portions are huge, but take one for the road, because if you're traveling through this area, you probably get hungry a little while later. It's a good thing to give to whoever you're traveling to see anyway. If you're passing through in the morning, they do a very generous breakfast. Most of the dishes in orbit around those biscuits that I mentioned. But really, to me, when I think of Rita Mae's Kitchen in Morgan City, I'm thinking about the gumbo, and I'm thinking about the fried seafood, and I'm thinking about how this place is just a good stop for Creole Bayou soul.
Louisiana Eats rambling reporter Ian McNulty. What is boudin noir? Stay tuned, and we'll answer that question when we come right back. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Rouse's Markets. Here's this week's culinary quiz question, brought to you with support from Popeye's Louisiana Culinary Institute. What is boudin noir? Boudin noir, also known as red boudin, is an increasingly scarce traditional Cajun sausage made with pig's blood. But there's nothing bloody about it. It's spicy, incredibly rich, and luckily still made at Bourgeois' Meat Market in Schriever, Louisiana. Until the 1970s, most meat markets were also slaughterhouses, but changing state and federal regulations brought about boudin noir's near demise. To use an animal's blood, it must be slaughtered in the presence of federal inspectors. Consequently, the number of operations where that's possible has shrunk to less than 20 in the state of Louisiana today. If you're interested in learning more about boudin noir and where you can still find it, pick up a copy of Maggie Hine Richardson's Hungry for Louisiana, because one thing's for sure, Maggie's always hungry for a little boudin. I'm Poppy Tooker, and this is Louisiana Eats.
I was born down in the southern land, ate my food from a greasy pan, but I don't let that bother me.
It's rare for a chef to craft impeccable menus entirely based on their wine selection. Chef Daniel Bruce has developed a stunning reputation for doing just that. For the past 25 years, he's been the chef at Meritage, the restaurant and wine bar at the Boston Harbor Hotel. At the same time, Daniel created the Boston Wine Festival, inspiring winemakers and enthusiasts with his unique synthesis of food and wine. I had the opportunity to hear Daniel's story, which is one of humble beginnings and a career built through lifelong mentorships and a deep-rooted sense of New England identity.
Starting way back, I always knew I was going to be a chef. I'm one of these lucky few that there was no choice in my mind. I was really fortunate when I was in high school, had a job as a pot washer. There was this line of pots from the back door all the way to the pot sink. And I'm like, I didn't even know a restaurant could have that many pots, and they were all burnt. So I got in there, and as I'm scrubbing these pots, I said, whenever I become a chef, I'm not going to burn these things because this is not fun. So this woman I worked for, Florence Stearns, became my first mentor, really, professional mentor, because every time I arrived in a restaurant, she was there. Every time I went home, she was there, and I just saw this incredibly deep passion for food and trying to make people happy by this great thing that we do, which is cook and have people come to the restaurant. She was the person that said you should go to culinary school because you have this great talent and you have this great passion. Don't do what I did, which is sort of learn by trial and error. Go to school, learn.
So Daniel, who was Florence Stern? Was she the owner of that restaurant with all the burned pots?
Yes, she was. She wasn't the one that burned the pots, but she was the owner. She was like probably the most well-known restaurateur in this little town of Skowhegan, Maine. So I went to Johnson & Wales, which is in Providence, Rhode Island. And then after I graduated from Johnson & Wales, I just realized I need to learn as much as possible. I took a job as an apprentice for 3 years. And apprentice means you get paid nothing, you work a lot of hours. And you go through all aspects of the kitchen: charcuterie, sauce making, baking, everything you can imagine,
That's really the old school European way of learning this. But you already had the chops from culinary school, so you had that behind you. 3 years was a long time with no pay. So who was it that you apprenticed with that was important enough for you to give that time?
It was a small place called The Castle, and it was very old school. He was an Albanian, and he had this old work ethic. Very hard worker, which I always love that. So after 3 years of doing the apprenticeship, my last dinner, this gentleman named Angelo Patacucci came in from Italy. And he was there 2 days. He'd come in the morning, I'd already be there. He'd go home, change, have dinner, have drinks, come back through the kitchen. I'm still there. He goes, do you have a home? I said, this is my home. And so he came to me his last day. He goes, you need to work with me. So he sent me a letter and said, Daniel, love to have you. Come in September. Take this flight. I'll meet you 5 hours from Rome. This is a little place. So he said, be at my place, be at this train station at this time. I had to figure out the rest. Well, I get on the plane, I drop down in Rome, went up to this place, and he was really my next mentor because he really formed my sort of international, feel of food. And the Italians have such a passion for life. And I used to hang out with these guys. And of course, I didn't speak any Italian, so it took me a long time. Every once in a while I hear Americano. I'm like, oh, that's me. What's going on? This kind of thing. I met all these just great people, and the chef, after a while, really liked me because I had great work ethics, but I also wanted to cook, and these cooks were just cooking because that was their job.
Right.
I used to make risotto with them, and now risotto is very near and dear to the Italians' heart, so he wouldn't let everybody do it. So I was his go-to guy, and used to give all these guys a hard time. Hey, this American comes over, and he's making risotto. And you guys, he said, listen, this guy wants to make risotto. We have to make risotto. There's a difference here. So it was so funny.
So how did you ever leave that behind?
Well, he wanted me to stay with him because he really took me on as sort of his son in a way, because he was like, listen, you're the son I always wanted. That this guy really loved food. From there, my brother got married, so I had a decision to make. Do I go back to Patacucci because he wanted me to come back to his original restaurant and be a sous chef because he liked the experience I got and it would be great for his restaurant. And I said, no, I have to go back because, family's family. I have to, And then he says, okay, are you going to come back? I said, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking New York because it was the place, New York. And he said, oh, I have 3 good friends in New York City. So my first day, I went back to my buddy's gym and his wife goes, oh, some French guy called this afternoon and wanted you to call him back. So it ended up being Alain Sayak, who was the chef at the Le Cirque. I called him back, and he goes, well, how much do you need to make? And so I'm like, oh, geez, I've never made any money in my life. The most I made was like $3.25 an hour. And I had heard my buddy say, oh, you can make big money in New York. So I said, $400 a week. He goes, gross or take home? I said, gross. He goes, can you start tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the morning? So I started there. And it really worked out well. I was there for 2.5 years. When Alain Sayak went from Le Cirque, he was asked to take over the 21 Club in Manhattan with Jeffrey Zakarian, and myself. So he wanted to take 2 guys with us. So I was there for a year, and Alan left after a year, and they said, will you take over as the chef? So I said, cool, I'll do it. I was 26 years old, and my first day on the job, like looking at guys on the line, talking to them. They had been line cooks for 30 years. I was 27 years old. I hadn't even been alive as long as these guys had been on the line cooking. So it's kind of a weird thing, you know?
Yeah, it's a very strange dynamic. So that's one of your great distinctions, is that you were the youngest executive chef in the history of the famous 21 in New York.
It was great. But the problem is, like, taking over a place like that, there are so many built-in signature dishes in a place like that. As a creative, I mean, I was like bursting with ideas. I'm like, wow. And then I got a call from this gentleman who was the general manager of the Boston Harbor Hotel. And I'm like, Boston? What am I going to do in Boston? New York's the only place to work. And if you look at any photo of Boston or any image, the arch of the hotel comes up as sort of landmark place. So I turned to my wife and I said, if that's the building, I'll consider it, because it was that dramatic. I walked in, the food was horrible, and I was like, wow, this place needs a guy like me, because, you know, I could change things. I knew it. And they offered me the job, even though a lot of them said, this guy he'll never last. So they were all like, yeah, 3 months, we'll give him 3 months. Well, of course, I outlasted all those guys, and now I've been there 25 years, which is pretty crazy.
That's crazy. And Daniel, I'd like to know, 25 years, you know, it's pretty characteristic of a chef. Unless you own the place, they tend to take what they need, learn what they want, do what's in their particular snapshot, and move on. What has kept you there for 25 years?
So 6 months after I arrived there, the general manager said we should do something special in the first quarter, because January, February, March in Boston was bleak. So he was thinking we should do some sort of a wine event. And the idea was to bring winemakers in and see how it worked. The first year we did 11 dinners. And from the first time I did a wine dinner, I had to taste the wines. And the winemakers committed to sending the wines in. I would taste them. I'd set up where the wines would be in course order. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work, because, do you do Merlot or Syrah? They're kind of evenly balanced. Where do you put it on the menu? Do you put them together? So after 1 year, all the winemakers that came were like, I can't believe this guy cares so much about the wine that he's not even making dishes from his menu. He's just creating these things based on what our flavors of the wine are. And sort of what happened because of that, I think my style of food just evolved to be a very wine-centric sort of based cuisine, where for me it's all about subtleties. So over the years, what happened is I developed these great relationships. Word sort of traveled, because a lot of chefs don't really understand that, yes, it's not just about the food. When you get to this level of wine and food, it's like understanding the synergy between the two and still work your magic. But, keep in mind, you may have to, knock it down a couple levels so it doesn't get too spicy, too sugary, too acidic, So I'm very humbled to say that I know a lot of winemakers. If I call them, and no matter who I call, and I said, listen, when you do a wine dinner next year, they just tell us what date you need us. I mean, that's crazy.
That's fantastic.
So I founded the festival in 1990, and now we're coming up on 26 years. In between times, I did one in New Orleans at the Maison du Puy for 6 years. New Orleans was fantastic, because I think of all the festivals, it was Boston and New Orleans that really, the community really embraced the concept of bringing these winemakers in. In fact, I remember getting a call from Emerald one day. He goes, how did you get this winemaker to come to New Orleans? I've been trying to get him for years. I said, because I asked him. But the truth is because I had formed this relationship with these guys from Boston, so they trusted what I was going to do in these other venues would hold true. And then also the relationship I have with my staff. I'm proud to say that my average length of stay in the kitchen is 15 years in my kitchen. And that even when they leave, I still keep in touch with them. They become friends. I try to mentor them. I try to get them jobs, because I think that that's part of you sort of get to a certain point. It's like, what am I giving back to this industry? And for me, it's all about how can I get these guys and women to be the best they can, and also find out what they want to do, so I can sort of advise them. So,
what about your mentor back in Italy? Did you all stay very close?
We did. He always kept in touch with him. He always followed me. He always knew what was going on. So when I got these jobs, he was like, wow, I knew this guy was going to do it. And then same thing with Florence. Florence became like my second mother. And so all through my career, she used to always call me up and say, I'm so proud of you. I can't believe it. And I knew what she meant to me, but I never really articulated it to her. And for some reason, the year she died, this is like 5 years ago, I just said, you know what? I just have to call Florence. And I called her up. I said, I just want to let you know what you mean to me, and that you set me on this road, and that you mean a lot to me. You're like my mom. And she was like broke down, and 2 weeks later she died. So it was sort of, I was sad, but I was really happy that I was able to say that to her, because I felt that saying it sometimes makes a big difference. So that all those connections for me have been really important. And I think that's why people stay with me, because I challenge them, but I treat them like, family. And I think that's why I'm still at the hotel, because it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears there. So
I'm curious, with all of the things, the exciting food synergies in California, in New Orleans, why did you stay in the Northeast? Is it the ingredients that you identify with? What kept you up there?
I mean, my cuisine is not really New England based, but it is certainly farm to table. And I will say that my favorite thing to cook is, there's no question, shellfish and fish, because it takes a deft, sort of delicate hand to not overpower those flavors. And I really enjoy working with them, because you have to be so careful not to overcook them. When I first came to Boston, there was this farmer who was really well known. He only delivered to 6 restaurants in Boston because he only made so much. And I called him up. I'm like, hey, I'm Daniel. I'm thinking, yeah, will you deliver? Yeah, maybe next year. I'll see if I can get you on the docket. So my next day off, I got a bottle of wine, some cheese. My wife and I went up to his farm. He was in the field working. I'm like, hey, how you doing, Daniel? Hung out, listened to what he had to say for like a couple hours. And I say, hey, listen, I brought some cheese and some wine. You want to have maybe we'll just hang out and talk. He was at my door the next day. And he became a great friend, because, they want to feel that connection, that you really love what you're doing. And so that's my sort of the way I approach all my purveyors. And that's been my approach at all the restaurants I do. Start with good ingredients, start with the best ingredients, and just treat them with respect. There's this fierce independence from, that you get in New England. And it's because you had to do so many things yourself. And I was able to be in that generation where I saw my parents and my grandparents be so self-sufficient. And if you can make it, do it. And it's great to meet people that really are passionate about what they do, because they sort of do the same thing. They really love what they're doing, and they do it themselves.
Daniel Bruce, chef at the Boston Harbor Hotel and founder of the Boston Wine Festival. I'm Poppy Tooker, and this is Louisiana Eats. Join us on Thursday, August 27th at the Rouse's Culinary Innovation Center at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, where Times-Picayune food writers Judy Walker and Marcel Bienvenu will help host our first Louisiana Eats and Cooks Club. To commemorate the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, Judy and Marcel's Cooking Up a Storm is being reissued in a special hardcover edition. We'll be cooking up a storm with Judy and Marcel and eating up a storm, too. For more information, visit the Southern Food and Beverage Museum's website at southernfood.org. That's it for this week's edition of Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Join us next week as we visit the rotating Carousel Bar in the middle of the French Quarter with bartender Marvin Allen.
People will come in and kind of freak them out once in a while, especially if it's like on a Saturday or Sunday morning when they've been out all night drinking. They come in and they're going, oh, I'm going to be sick, I'm going to be sick. Then I'll get in there and I'll tell them, no, it's not moving. Their friends do the same thing, and it really messes with their heads.
Subscribe to our podcast, hear today's show, or catch up on previous editions anytime online at itsneworleans.com. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen, Rouse's Markets, and Zatarain's. Additional support for Louisiana Eats is provided by Bacardi USA and Dickie Brennan's Palace Cafe, home of the crab meat cheesecake and white chocolate bread pudding. located in the historic Werline Building on Canal Street. Our media sponsor is Louisiana Life Magazine, the magazine of a great state. Original theme music by Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes. Big thanks to producers Joe Schreiner, Chris Kehoe, and Sarah Holtz. Come visit us anytime in our Louisiana Eats studios at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. I'm Poppy Tooker. Louisiana Eats is a production of WWNO and the University of New Orleans.